So you guys are in for a real treat. We have Tom Fincel down from Eugene, who's a longtime Telperion guru and has repotted a lot of these trees in the past. And he is giving us a really, really in-depth, great photo presentation. You guys, I've never seen anything this good. So you're in for a treat. Let's welcome Tom and learn about repotting.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I'm not from a performance background like Andrew is, so I pre-apologize for reading some of my notes and things, but I've got a technique here that I've been playing around with for a few years that I've had quite good success repotting these big root-bound trees that come from nursery containers or pots. I think I'm going to need the pointer and stuff, so I think I'll just hang around down here. It's less scary, too. So I've got a technique, and I went ahead and printed up a handout of basically the text part of my talk so that you all have good notes, and you don't have to write anything down, don't have to take any notes. And if I misspeak, then you've got it correctly in the notes. So I apologize for reading the notes, but I think you'll get better information that way. And then after we go through the notes for a few minutes, then we'll just go with pictures. I've got 50-some pictures that will hopefully explain what we're talking about. And we'll take questions as we're putting the pictures up. So, ready? Okay. We'll just start with a background picture, Reed.
Quick question.
Yes.
Had you been taught the top-down approach, or is this you?
I think it's me. I've asked a lot of people and Jonas and everybody, and nobody's heard about this yet. I find it kind of hard to believe because it struck me as a natural way to deal with these trees. But and if anybody has seen something like this, I'd be really interested in finding out who else does it. Yes, good question. So my name's Tom Fincel, live in Eugene, been a bonsai enthusiast for about 25 years. In fact, my first convention was up here from BSOP in Portland. I think it was 97, so that's where I kind of got my start, so thank you, BSOP, for that. First half of my 25 years didn't result in much accumulation of actual bonsai knowledge, but luckily that changed when I started learning from Gary Wood from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and Michael Hagendorn. Chris and Lisa Kirk have been really good bonsai friends in Eugene prior to moving to Telperion Farms. And after they purchased their farm southeast of Salem, we formed a little study group and held sessions in the shop at Telperion when Gary was out from Alabama to help with the trees on the farm. So I learned most of my pine growing and pruning techniques from Gary while at these workshops or while up in the fields with him. One of the important components of Gary's growing techniques is the use of strong growing sacrifice leaders to induce back budding and grow the massive trunks that Telperion's famous for. I bought and dug my first black pine from their upper field, and this is their upper field back in 2012, and you can tell how small the trees are in this picture, 2012, compared to some of the late pictures. At that time, these pines were only 10 years old and had been in the field for 4 or 5 years. Gary taught me that after digging, it's best to just plant the tree in the grow bag in a nursery container. This way, the tree would continue to grow strongly so that I could continue the tree's development. He always stressed how important it was to keep the tree growing strongly. So when I eventually got around to doing something with the roots in the spring of 2016, I just came up with this idea of top-down repotting. Gary used sacrifice leaders and branches all the time, so I thought, hey, why not use sacrifice roots too? So for the past 6 years, I've been experimenting with top-down repotting, frequently refining the technique with Gary's guidance. I've done quite a few trees now, probably 25 to 30, and I've liked the results. So I decided to do this presentation here for you in the Farm to Table seminar. It seemed like the perfect opportunity and perfect place to talk about this technique. So what is top-down repotting? The traditional way of repotting trees is what I call bottoms-up technique. You reduce the root mass gradually, or not so gradually, as we just heard from Matt. You know, some people use chainsaws, all kinds of heavy-duty equipment. But eventually you get the root mass small enough to fit into a training pot. Then you gradually switch out the field soil for bonsai soil over the next couple of repotting sessions. And unless you possess wizard bonsai skills like all of these guys over here, and I definitely do not possess those skills, these trees always slowed down in their growth rate because you had just cut off the bottom, which is the strongest root growth in the pot. And those weaker top roots are most likely still in field soil with a little bonsai soil around the edges. So with top-down repotting, I basically do a bare rooting of the top half of the root ball and don't touch the bottom half of the roots. That's my sacrifice. In the bottom half, after the top half is bare rooted, I do a lot of root repositioning, typically using twine, to optimize the position of the roots that are present. Then I repot the whole thing back into a slightly larger nursery container using my best bonsai soil mix in the top half. Then 2 years later, I take it out of the nursery container, saw off the bottom half, and pot up the top half with its healthy new root growth and perfect bonsai soil into some type of bonsai pot. Any questions so far? I'm going through this fast. Hopefully the pictures will explain things better.
Question from back here, Tom. What photo do you want me on?
2.
Probably this one?
One before.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Just kind of background. The top-down repotting technique includes 3 major benefits I found. Number 1, continued strong growth of the tree. That untouched bottom half of the roots keep that tree growing strongly. And with a strong growing tree, I can continue to develop branches, continue to heal the big scars, and to do grafting if those are required. Benefit number 2 is that since the bare-rooted top half with its proper bonsai soil is all that's present in the bonsai pot, I don't have to worry about root problems caused by field soil remaining in the pot in years to come. And benefit number 3, which I've really come to appreciate maybe as much as the first 2, it's really incredible, is that after I bare root that top half, I can see the roots on the top half so incredibly clear. Sometimes I even discover that the surface roots are so poor that I culled a tree at that time instead of putting 10 years into a tree that will never make the grade. And by having all those top roots fully exposed, I can move them into better positions if needed, and I can move them when the roots are still small enough and flexible enough to be moved. In 5 years' time, maybe those roots have grown so much that you can't bend them anymore. Most of my positioning is done by tying roots together with twine to pull them into position, and sometimes I'll use small pieces of cork or wood as spreaders between the roots. I found with the twine that decomposes usually in 6 months or so, so it never damages the roots like if you were going to use wire on the roots. I'm convinced that the top-down repotting technique saves me at least 2 years' time and usually more over standard repotting techniques. And is the top-down method necessary for every tree? Absolutely not. This is a small subset of trees that benefit from this. Established trees and bonsai pots have entirely different technique. Everybody knows what those are. Young trees can be safely bare-rooted sometimes, go right into a bonsai pot. And many deciduous trees can have more aggressive traditional repotting techniques used and still maintain that strong growth we're looking for. I found that top down really shines when you have a large conifer in a grow bag or deep nursery container, and especially if it's become root bound from being in that container longer than it should. Any questions so far? Yes.
Have you done that on a deciduous tree?
Yes. The Styrex. Yes.
How'd it work?
Fine. Yep. And you know that I haven't done enough deciduous to really get a feeling for is it vastly better or not. I think that doing aggressive root pruning on a deciduous is not going to be near as hard on the tree. So I think pines and junipers are the species that I think are really going to benefit from this technique. Any other questions so far? Yes.
Hey, Tom, you mentioned if the upper roots were so bad that you just pulled the tree at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a method that you could introduce that would to grow new roots?
That would be questions. The question is on those trees that really do have lousy top surface roots, is there methods or grafting techniques that could be adding new roots to that tree? And those questions would really have to be directed to the wizards on the side there. So generally, you know, those roots we're dealing with on these trees are so large that I'm not really interested in starting a root that's a 1/4 inch diameter. Yes.
So Tom, with this technique, the water column that exists in that pot between the two soils, the good sustainable bonsai soil and then that field soil at the bottom, do you have any problems as you water?
I have not. So what I use on my bottom half, you know, that pot is an inch wider in diameter. So what I use in the bottom half is used soil or just straight pumice, large straight pumice. So it has very good drainage. The field soil itself that the roots are in, I have never ran into root rot problems with them. I think it's in just such a large container, and with all the pumice in there, it drains well enough that I have not found that to be an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Okay. Yes. Yes.
What's your approach to Yamadori roots? Are there any overlap between how you treat this and Yamadori?
If the Yamadori was growing in a deep nursery container or in a deep wooden box, then they could be handled that way. You know, what you're trying to do is grow a new set of roots up high, what's going to eventually go into your bonsai pot. So yes, you could do that, and by leaving the lower roots untouched, that would help keep the Yamadori alive. So it takes something potted deeply and something that you want to grow a new level of roots up higher. Good question. Yes?
It's probably great for nursery stock though. Like,
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
have you used it for that?
Yes, yep. And I've done it in, 1 gallon nursery stock that has been super root bound, that are just rock solid. And they're just little repottings and things, but they can still take many, many hours because they're so incredibly tight that there's just so difficult to pick the soil out.
Did you do that on those boxwoods?
Boxwoods?
Boxwoods that you
No. Nope. The ones that we just dug from Bob Balzer? Yeah. I have not yet because they're still in the nursery containers. Could they be? They're not in super deep pots, so it wouldn't be as appropriate. Yes?
So like on like a 1 gallon pot, you just kind of like make a cut all around?
Yeah. We'll just look at pictures. Yeah. The pictures are worth 10,000 words.
How often do you go back and redo again? How often would you go back?
How often would I go back to? Okay, so generally I leave after I've got that new soil in the top half, generally I leave them 2 years. Once in a while I'll go 3 years, especially if I've got a lot of top work that I need to do and I know that that tree is going to be in that large pot for a long time. If I'm in no hurry to get it into the bonsai pot, sometimes I leave them 3 years and by that time it's really tight. Even in 2 years, all these black pines, all these junipers, that top level, which is usually 4 inches deep or so, those are rock solid in 2 years. They don't fall apart. It's amazing. It looks just like a regular bonsai that you repot from a bonsai pot. Ready to go, Reed? Yeah. Okay, let's go with picture number 3. Just a little background where I do it. We live out in the country. We've got a few acres, so I've set up a couple tables that are on the edge of a slope, and the tables are just chain link gates off of animal cages. So, but the chain link really works good for allowing the water and the soil and everything just to fall through. So it's a nice setup. I just put them on T-post. And next one, Reed. And this is a side view of it. I put a slanted piece of plywood underneath the table so that it keeps all the water and stuff off of you and just goes down the front of the hill. So it makes a good place to do a lot of trees really quick. Okay, Reed. And then as I've gotten older, I learned that a scaffolding plank hooks on to the side of the pipe there, and I spray the plank down and take my tree and just slide it up there. So I don't have to lift them by myself. Okay, Reed. Kind of learned this from Ziggy. A lot of you guys saw him yesterday at the Super Workshop. I got lots of fabulous ideas. Thank you, everybody. But Ziggy is a very heavy tree, and he's a very wide tree and gangly, and it's hard to get that pot close to your body to pick him up. So I donated my left inguinal ring to Ziggy about 1.5 years ago. So after that, I've gotten smarter and use ramps and stuff. Okay. So let's get started. This is just a small field-grown pine. This one I actually grew in the field myself. And I think I had it in the ground 5.5 years, something like that, maybe 6 years. And it's a little Japanese black pine. Okay. And so you pull it out of the nursery container. It was still in its grow bag. These are the same grow bags that Telperion used. They're 10-inch bags, 8 or 9 inches deep. And you can see all the mycorrhiza on the outside of the bag. You know, obviously a very happy tree. Take your utility knife and make your cut through the bag. Okay. And usually if I'm going to leave the bottom half of the bag on, then I'll cut out a circle from the bottom. Telperion bags have an impervious layer on the bottom that doesn't drain very well or let roots through very well. So I like to cut that out just so that I get good drainage and roots can extend and continue to grow in that bottom couple inches of the nursery container. Okay. So I cut off the top half of the grow bag, and these aren't too tight because they were only in the ground for 5 or 6 years compared to some of the Telperion trees that have been in the ground for 12 years. But that's pretty typical of what you find inside the grow bag. You'll find a lot of these knobs where the root tip has penetrated the grow bag, and as the root grows thicker, then it self prunes, and you get these little knobby things just inside the grow bag. Okay. Next thing I do is as far as tools, I have 2 tools that I like to use the most. The stainless steel chopstick, both links, I find are durable, and I find the tip is smooth enough that it doesn't do too much damage to the roots. Next one. And then the other tool I really like to use for finer work is the angled nose tweezers, and they're pretty gentle too on the roots as long as you don't push too hard. And here you can see I've been starting to remove some of the soil. And I've decided to leave the bottom half of the bag on this one. If I have a tree in a bag, a lot of times I'll leave it in there so that I can use the bottom of the bag to protect the bottom of the roots. So when I'm manipulating things, I'm not damaging those roots or losing more soil from the bottom half. And frequently I'll use that bottom half bag to tie some of my twine ties on. Okay. I got more and more into the center. You can see you beat up roots pretty good. You see all the little yellow nicks on these roots. You beat them up pretty good because these root balls are really tight. But this kind of root damage seems to heal very quickly. I have never had a problem killing roots, and that type of damage really heals up pretty quickly. Maybe these guys could tell us why that happens so easily. And then, I'm starting to see a little green there, so I'm starting to get to the point where you can see all the way through this root mass. Found a plastic lid. Obviously, I had stuck a plastic lid in there when I planted these seedlings 5 years ago to try to get the horizontal root spread that I'm looking for. Next. If I have a tile or a geodisc or a plastic lid, I try to get it out so that I don't have to deal with that or drainage issues and things. But I like to get all that stuff out if possible, and usually you can. Even tiles that are broken and really, really tight in there, eventually you can break them down and get pieces out. Okay.
Are you rinsing those roots in water to get?
Yep. Yep. You'll see pictures, but I'm using the hose. So I found when I do these, I want to make sure that root mass is really, really wet. So if I have one that has been kind of dried out, sometimes the centers on those get pretty dry and there's organic material in there, so they get pretty waterproof. So a lot of these trees, I'll set in a tub for overnight, a couple days ahead of time, because I really want these roots very moist, because I've found that the wetter they are, the easier you can pick those soil particles out without damaging the roots. If you need to take a break for lunch or whatever, just take your wet towels and cover it up. And, you can leave, as long as it's not sunny, you can leave these guys sit for hours or overnight or whatever you want to do. It won't hurt anything. Okay? So this is just to showing how you use water. A lot of times I'll tip that root ball up and use my long chopstick with one hand to just twirl and loosen things up, and then I'll stick the hose in from the other end and just wash through, so it'll carry all the soil and contents through. By using the water, I can use the water to take out particles so that I don't have to just rely on picking them out. Allowing the water to do it causes a lot less damage to those roots. Okay, next. And I use a pretty high pressure spray because all the bubbles and everything that goes through there really helps loosen up those particles. Okay. And then this is the tree. After the bare rooting is done, I'd put a white cloth there behind just so that you can see, how much you get out. On a tree that doesn't have huge roots like this, you can probably bare root it to 95%, maybe 97% even. So you are able to get most of the roots out. On a small tree like this, I generally would spend maybe 2.5 hours, something like that. It would take me to do it. The really big Telperion trees, I've spent average more like 4 to 6 hours and maybe up to 8 hours to bare root a top half if it's really, really super tight. But you can see all the way through there, so most of the soil is gone. You see the big roots coming down to the bottom half, big one here on the side. And pretty nice nabari on this tree, and quite a few fine roots on this tree too, high up. So this tree will root up in that top half really, really fast. Here again, you can see you do beat up the roots pretty hard. Andrew, or why do roots heal that quick? That you can do this kind of work?
So I'll answer that with another question. What does root hormone create? Callus tissue. Callus. And from callus, we get roots. Root hormone does not create roots, it creates callus. Callus on a plant is indifferentiated tissue. It's not like if I'm performing surgery on you and I nick your heart and it regrows heart tissue, right? Callus on a plant can form roots. That's how we create air layers, like what John's going to be doing later. Or it can create a shoot if it's high up on the tree and create a branch. And so when you nick it off all like that, that's creating a lot of scar tissue that's going to callus, and that's going to create more roots.
Would you ever consider that excessive root damage, or no problem?
A little bit, but I mean, you have so much down below that
It heals quickly. Yeah, I've always found that. It blew my mind when I first started this that I could damage them that bad and they'd heal up, but they always seem to do that.
I found that sometimes those bigger injured roots will die, but the tree's happy enough just to grow from those very top ones to the smaller ones.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
The same way, I don't worry about the damage.
Okay, very good. Okay, Reed. And then this is the, I take a lot of pictures, obviously, when I'm doing my repotting, because next year or the next time I go to repot, I want to be able to look in there and see what the roots look like. And this really allows me to not have to, relearn the tree again. I can just look at pictures and know exactly what I had in mind. So this picture, I've set a block under there, changing my planting angle a little bit, and this is doing the root repositioning work. So, when this top half is bare rooted, gosh, you can see everything, where all the roots are. So a lot of times I'll cut off roots that are misplaced up high that I can't use, but most typical I use twine, just jute twine. And I brought my roll here, but very inexpensive. But it's also very strong, and it holds its knots well when you're tying things together, so that the knots don't slip out. But I generally end up tying a root that's out of position to a lower root that is stronger, so I can pull that top root into a better position, and then I just put a square knot on it, and so. That's pretty typical for the amount of roots I'll reposition. Okay, Reed. And then this is the back side of that tree. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times I'll just make a little hole in the top of that lower half bag, and I can pull quite hard, on a big root like that. But I can really see exactly where those roots are and just, get them in their best possible position. And of course they only have to grow like that for one season and they stay there. And the twine rots and is gone in 6 months, so nothing is girdled. Okay. Yeah.
You removed the disc from at some point in the last few slides.
Yes.
And it looks like you didn't cut any of the structural roots there to slide the disc out. So did you just chop it up?
I had just put my pliers on it and twisted it, and it kind of just folded up over the pliers and pulled it out that way.
And that one was plastic. Is there a better material that's easier to pull out at that point?
The plastic's pretty easy. Geodiscs are fairly easy, but they tear frequently. And the tiles, they're really not that bad because you can break them. So you break them in situ, and where they're at up there, and then you just pull out the pieces. Good question. Any other questions so far?
Tom, I'll just say this is not only a wonderful technique expose, but a master class in bonsai photography.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much.
Everyone take note of that, too.
Pardon? Those are 10-inch grow bags. Yes. That's the standard size that Telperion uses, and that's what I've used. Yes.
If it's not in a grow bag,
yes,
if it's in a nursery pot or something, do you put anything around that bottom half of the root to kind of
protect them? No. Generally, they're still tight enough. They've been in that position a long time. As long as they were in the nursery container for a couple of years, they'll stay together. I haven't found that to be an issue. I like to actually leave the grow bags on probably more to tie to than to protect the roots, but it serves both purposes. Good question. Yes?
Leave the plastic on, cut the bottom out, so when you slip it into a larger pot with pumice or something around it, you could then drill and tie into that plastic.
Oh, the plastic nursery container. Yes, and that's a good point. Sometimes if it's really tight in the nursery container, I'll just cut the nursery container horizontally and a vertical cut, peel off the top 3/4 and leave that bottom quarter. Yes, and then take that off later, but after I'm done with my work.
Look at some of the trees that Tom brought. It's obvious he's cut the plastic pot, saved the top, lowered it down, and he's got screws holding it together rather than just cutting it off.
He was just mentioning, you know, a lot of people use that technique. When you have a nursery container, a lot of times they're taller than they need to be. And instead of working and looking at that tree way down deep in that pot, you just take a utility knife, make your horizontal cut at the proper level, and make one vertical cut so you can take that top half, drop it down, and then just take sheet metal screws and reattach it. It gives you a nice solid top, and it gives you something you can still grab onto and carry easily. Jonas's tree is done like that. It was sitting down very deeply. It was very difficult to see inside there to, you know, determine where fronts are and angles are and things. So I do that on a lot of the trees just so that I can get better visibility. This just a top view of that same tree. Just shows you more of the root changes. Little cut paste on a root that was removed up there. But I'm just amazed at this root repositioning and how well it works with this technique. Okay. And then I slip it. Typically, I use a nursery container that's an inch or so larger than what it came out of. Kind of depends on, you know, how big of a root mass I want for the bonsai pot too. If I'm trying to keep it pretty tight, then I'll go back into the same pot. This nursery container is the same one it came out of because it's a smaller tree, so it was large enough. So I'll set the first. I'll take the empty nursery container and do my drainage holes and stuff, and I'll put in, you know, an inch or two of old potting soil or large pumice that I have extra. And then I set the tree on top of that, and then I'll use a little, typically old potting soil or even just straight pumice to get down and get down in the bottom half of the nursery container. If I'm really tight on getting stuff down there, I make sure that I use material that if it does end up getting into the top half, it's going to be good bonsai soil yet. Okay? And then you just keep, after you get the bottom half, the old bottom half solid, then you just start adding your bonsai soil. You know, I use a typical mix, 2/3 pumice, 1/3 akadama, screened to 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch size. And I just keep adding layers and layers, just, you know, small layers at a time, and put it on a turntable and keep chopsticking, you know, and go clockwise one time and counterclockwise another time, just like everybody's told. And then just keep adding layers and chopsticking so that you make sure you don't have any air pockets in there. And also when you're chopsticking, be very cognizant of your ties, because if you're really aggressive and wiggling a lot, you could loosen up a tie and screw up your root repositioning. So be careful with the ties. Okay? And that's just an after picture. And it looks pretty similar to the picture you started with, but now you've got great bonsai soil in that top half, and that tree's going to grow some new, really terrific roots there. And, you know, for the next 2-3 years, I can just keep working. This tree, obviously, you know, that's the new top. This is sacrifice branch yet. Obviously, I'd cut off a couple sacrifice leaders already. So you can just continue that work that you need to do for the next couple of years, because these trees just continue to grow strongly. Okay? This is just another pine. This is another small pine. I've got a lot of different trees in here. The first one I had the full series of steps. Most of these other ones I just have 2 or 3 pictures of the trees just to show you a lot of differences on what the roots look like and what your finished product looks like. So this is a smaller tree that top half is bare rooted, was out of the bag already, so nothing on the bottom. Some of these you end up bare rooting 75%, 80%. You know, each tree is different, what you find in there. I usually try for getting 4 inches or so of bare root on the top, but a lot of times you'll accidentally take off a little bit more, or if the tree is on an angle, a lot of times you'll take off a little bit more of the bottom too. Next one. And then that same tree, after doing the root repositioning, you can see how you bring those roots down, bring them in the right direction. Wine cork there, I don't know where that came from. Chris Kirk was talking about that. We have a what was it? A bonsai club with a wine habit, but no, we had a wine club with a bonsai habit. Yes. A lot of the pictures have wine glasses in them, obviously.
I think you have a question over here.
Yes.
I was just interested. Really nice roots. Thanks for sharing this.
Sure.
Preparation, did you do ahead of time before putting it in the ground?
Yeah. Usually I'll grow them in a raised bed for 2 or 3 years as seedlings, so that I dig them up every spring and do root work on them and put them back in the raised bed. And then when I go into the grow bag, these grow bags, I did use just the usual Telperion mix with the organics. I did a batch up this spring where I did the top half with good bonsai soil, so trying to even make it easier so that you don't have to do that bare rooting. Yes?
Do you ever prune off any really large roots?
The question was, do you prune off any really large roots? No large roots that go down into the bottom half, because I don't want to affect the strength of the tree. Have I done large roots that are living solely in the top half? Absolutely. Yep. If there's something that needs shortening, and typically those roots don't have a lot of fine roots off of them, if they're high up in the soil mass, so I will shorten them. Other questions?
Tom, since you document through photography so much, have you noticed that the calluses aid in forming the fine roots in the top half that's been worked?
Question was, do the cuts and calluses help form new roots in the top half? I don't know the answer to that, but you get such good root formation that I don't know what drives it, but you do get really good fine roots up high. Okay, Reed. Just the tree repotted in the nursery container. A lot of my nursery containers in this kind of material, I screw a cedar stake just inside the pot, with a couple sheet metal screws there, and tie the sacrifice to it. A much easier way to stabilize a tree than running wires from higher in the tree down to the edge, and I, of course, never use any wire inside the nursery container. So I find stakes work really easy, and only have to leave them in there one growing season. You can take those screws out and slip it out then. Okay, Reed. This is one of Chris Kirk's favorite trees. It's a Japanese black pine, field grown there at Telperion, of course. And sitting at its normal potting angle, it's a very natural semi-cascade. And so Chris has been good enough to allow me to play with this tree for a while since the fire. And so this is the before picture. And it's really a pretty tree, and like I say, a natural semi-cascade. And so I've changed the planting angle to get this section of the trunk away from horizontal. Had a really large cut and stub there that is gone now. that stuck out about 4 inches. And it had a very large cut stub up here that is gone. I did quite a bit of grafting up in here, put new grafts on this upper branch to start my new apex and side branches. And then I've got grafts on the back branches so that I can bring all of this in. And so I think I've got 6 grafts on the top of this tree here that I'll build my new tree out of. This semi-cascade branch, it's got a lot of buds in close, so I won't have to graft that. Just on my nursery containers, a lot of times I'll take a yellow lumber pencil when I do my evaluation, and I'll put a vertical line there to make it easy for me to remember the next time I work on it what the angle was. And the other thing I do is if I've got a 4x6 there, where that 4x6 crosses the bottom of the pot, I'll make a mark so that I can just stick my 4x6 right up to those marks on both sides of the pot. And right there on the pot, I write how high that's up. So I would write 5.5 inches up on that side. So all of those are tricks that I use because I have no memory, but I use them so that I can continue my plan easily without taking a lot of time to reevaluate each time I work on the tree. Okay, next. This one was still in its grow bag, and when they dug it, they rolled the top half of the grow bag down. So this is the rolled down part of the grow bag, and it was sitting up probably this high in the field, and they rolled it down over itself. And so this is the bottom of the grow bag already. So you just never know what you're going to find in these things. It's like a box of chocolates, you know. You just never know what you're going to find, and each tree is a little different. You just have to be flexible and deal with them. So this is one that had probably been in a nursery container for 4 years or so out of the field. So it had a pretty good layer of roots in the bottom of the nursery container, but the bottom of the bag was right at that level. So, oh, and the other thing on this, you know, when you're working on your roots and bare rooting the top half, make sure you position your tree at the new potting angle, because you want to keep your horizontal, you know, that way. So I've got a little thing on hinges that I can just stick a brick under and keep it at the right angle, and you know, attach the top of the tree to the side of the brick there. But that allows me, so when I do my finished cut, it'll be horizontal, or I do my finished bottom work, it'll be horizontal. Okay, Reed. And here again, just, you know, hose and stainless steel chopstick, just work and pick away at them. You know, this is part of the geodisc. This big root's going to be a problem someday, but it goes straight down into the bottom half. So I could not cut that root this time. Eventually, I will be able to cut that root with an angle cut and shorten and get rid of this. And this side of the tree didn't have very many roots whatsoever. So, you know, this tree's going to have some root issues, but we'll be able to work with them. And eventually, you'll have nice surface roots on this side, and just, you know, won't have many surface roots present on this side. But you can still get that into the pot, no problem. Pretty solid hunks of wood down through here, a lot of burl. Matt, I just learned about burls. Thank you. I've never heard anybody call the root mass of burl like that. And
that's what I noticed, and just did an experiment.
And yeah, and it really explains then, because I keep wondering how you can saw these things off and have the potential to grow roots from this stuff. But if they're burl, yeah.
I don't recommend, if you have no choice, that's when you do it, but it's not something you try to do.
Yeah.
Not worth the tree disease. I expected it to die. Like,
right.
I see it as I got lucky too.
Yeah.
Like, I still have only done one, so I can't prove that it's going to work.
You know, I've
And a lot of it has to do with the aftercare and how you pot it up. So.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Andrew, did you have a comment?
5, so that's 6 out of 6.
Yeah. And I've done a couple, probably not as aggressive as what they've done, but I've done a couple. So that kind of explains to me, if they're burls, why they can produce roots that easily. So
What's a burl as opposed to a root?
who wants to, Matt, do you want to?
They were roots at one point that literally just fused together and got too thick and just became one.
Okay, so got that answer. The question was, what was a burl? And Matt explained that it's just roots that thickened up so much that they just ended up combining, which is really common in these older Telperion trees, that you'll have a solid massive root. Yes, Matt?
The obvious way I noticed that was because after I made the cut, you could see where the lines were within that burl, and because it wasn't just one solid mass of wood with rings, it was like burl wood.
Cool. I've got a picture that kind of shows that too, a little bit later. Next one, Reed. And this is the tree after the top half bare rooting, and probably ended up bare rooting 75% of this one, so a little bit more than I wanted to, but with the position of the bottom of the bag that high, I just basically had to do it. But this gives you a view of those big heavy roots in there and what you have to deal with in the future. Next one. And then this is the tree after it went back into the nursery container. This was a little bit larger nursery container, like an inch larger. And but now it's planted at the correct potting angle, so that's all set for the rest of its life. Okay, next. Do we need to? Yes. Do we need to take a break, Andrew, or anything, or do you want me to just keep going? Okay, yes.
Could you go back 2 pictures?
Can we go back 2 pictures, Reed? Yeah.
So there aren't a lot of fine roots at what the original root line was.
Yeah.
Are you expecting those to develop, or are you going to lower it down?
The question was, he does not see many roots up here, right? Yeah, many fine roots up here. And when I make my cut, it's going to be 4 or 5 inches deep. So you're cutting through a lot of big roots. But I have found that in the 2 to 3 years, you're going to have a full layer of fine roots up here. I'm not positive if they come from this part of the root. I kind of get the impression they do. But you'll have a nice mass of fine roots up there. So I think that these roots do come from, the new roots do come from those old roots. Okay, let's go ahead a couple. Perfect. So this is a really big Telperion black pine. This one came out pre-fire. I have chosen this one and worked on it. So this is the pre-shot, okay? And, really big trunk. Almost filled the bag. And I had taken the bag off when I brought the tree down from the farm. So it had been in that nursery container, I believe 3 years, 2 to 3 years. And this is a picture of after bare rooting the top half. See the big heavy roots going down into the bottom half. So this is a pretty typical one, and a lot of nice fine roots. So this tree won't have any problem at all. It's got a lot of high fine roots too. Okay. Just the other side of this tree. Pretty good hunk of burl right through there. Okay. This next tree, a little bit smaller. This is a nice 50-50 top half bare root, and don't touch the bottom half. And you can see how well that bottom half hangs together. This wasn't in a bag anymore, but you really haven't done any damage down below. Okay. And this is that same tree after doing the root work. This one doesn't have as much twine on it, but still that root repositioning is really critical. Root was removed there that was crossing and up too high. Okay. This is a tree, just like you never know what you're going to find in these bags. Sometimes you have no idea, and you take the top down, and it just blows you away how great it is. So the soil was like at that level, and I knew with the chopstick, I knew I had a little spread there, but as I started the top half bare root on this, the flare just kept going out and out. This is solid wood flare, 360 degrees around this tree. And, you know, you're just so ecstatic and so happy to see something like that. So, Chris, Lisa, Gary, wow. You know, sometimes it's just totally amazing what these bags produce. Okay. Just another one. This one, obviously, a smaller tree in a bag yet. Just another picture of what they typically look like. There's one of those balls where the root had been self-pruned. Okay. Another picture of a tree with a lot of root repositioning done on it. Okay. And like I say, when I can leave the bottom half of the bag on, I cut the bottom out of the bag, but I leave the bottom half on so that I can pull roots down with the top of that bag. Makes a good sturdy anchor. Okay. This is a really large tree. I call him Boss Hog. He came down from the farm about 3 years ago. Had worked on him up for a few years in the field up there too. And this tree was just growing in a big patch of weeds, and I guess nobody had saw it, and nobody had pulled up the branches to look and see what was under there. But I darn near fainted, and then I quickly looked all over the tree for sold tags, and no sold tags on it. So I put 3 sold tags on it, and then I looked up Chris and said, "Chris, is that tree for sale?" And it was. So it did have one defect. The dripper line was really tight around it earlier in its life, so that it's got a little reverse taper there. But this is close to 10 inches of solid wood, so it was a pretty impressive trunk. And the tree's only 1.5 feet tall, so it's a pretty impressive tree. Okay, next one. However, as in these really old trees, a lot of times you find surprises that aren't so fun. Below the surface, this root goes across the entire front of the tree, the front potted side of the tree, and it's about 3.5 inches in diameter. So learning what I did at the seminar from Matt and the guys, I think that eventually I can get roots to grow out of the bottom of that. So I think it's going to be a doable tree. You think so, Matt? Did you take a quick peek at that, at this big root?
As far I can kind of see it. Is it just crossing over?
Yeah, it goes side to side, 3.5 inches. Do you think I can get roots to grow off of that eventually?
I think if you work it back in stages, though, it might encourage it, just like dropping a branch back might encourage it to grow closer.
Okay, thank you. Oh, here's one that I left the bottom half of the container on to protect the container, whoever asked that question earlier. Okay. Just a close-up of that root. So as Matt said, you do some damage. I used my knob cutters and took out a couple chunks from the bottom. I don't know if I should pack it with sphagnum moss or root hormone, but I didn't. And then this root comes around and then goes down into the bottom half. So this part of the root was like 2.5 inch diameter. I took a saw and took a little wedge out of 50% of that root to get the tree to get used to the idea that it's not going to be there forever. Okay. This is another really pretty one. This one, the soil level was right there. This is a post-fire tree. It's a pretty nice tree. It's got a little bit of taper issue. Had a lot of nicely placed branches, and I thought I was going to sell this one, but this repotting season has run so long, I was running out of material to do repotting on, and so I says, I'll go ahead and do a top down on this tree. And I'll be darned, I had no idea that Nabari was there. So that's another one of these really, really pretty Nabaris that just give you goosebumps. So I'll hang on to this tree for a little bit. Okay, next. Other side of that one, just beautiful flare, 360 degrees around there. It just knocks your socks off. Okay. Just to let you know, I do other species too. So this Shimpaku that in a grow bag, and I've had it in my raised bed for 10 years or something. These are the last two I dug up, but I wanted to show a couple junipers to show you the species differences. So here it was just dug straight out of the raised bed. And next one. And just have a few pictures. This is pretty typical appearance of the juniper roots after you do the bare rooting on the top half. Of course, I left the bottom half of the bag on since it was there. And end up beating up roots just about the same as the pine, so they seem to do fine with it. But this is a pretty typical top half bare root, okay? And yes.
So if you don't have a grow bag
Yep.
and you have it in a nursery pot, when you do the bare rooting, you can cut the nursery pot down to what you want to leave. Then do you take the nursery pot off when you go to repot?
Okay. Excellent question. The question was, if it's in a nursery container, not in a bag, and you leave the bottom half of the nursery container on to protect the roots while you're working on it, do you remove that bottom half of the nursery container before you go into the new nursery container? Yes, I always do that. Just leave it on for protection, and then just before I'm ready to pot it up, then I'll slip that bottom half off. Any other quick questions? Okay. Okay. And then this just potted up. One of those stakes again inside the pot to stabilize the tree. Okay. There's another tree right next to it, and just dug up out of the ground in the grow bag there. These are the same grow bags that Telperion uses. Okay. Removed the top half, did the top half bare root. Got lots of large vertical roots going into the bottom half. Okay. And this one I did quite a bit of root work with the twine to move things and tie them down. Okay. And this is the tree after potting. Generally add a little bit of fine shredded moss up on top too to encourage those top surface roots. And these trees always go on bottom heat, just heat mat bottom heat, and typically in my hoop house, unheated hoop house. Okay. Fun part. So after you've done all that work on the repotting and gosh, you put it back into the nursery container. So it looks just like how I started. So yeah, you really haven't gone that far. You have, but it doesn't look like it. But after 2 years, then this is the really fun part. The two fun parts are the first time you expose the top and see what you have. And the second fun part is when you actually get to do the separation. So here's a couple series of pictures with the separation. So this is a Telperion Scots pine that Karen has. It's a twin trunk. There's some pictures on the photo boards of her working on it with Michael and Bobby. But this had been in there for 2 to 3 years. And so bring it out to the table, lay it horizontal. That's Karen's hands holding the tree off the side of the table, but you want to get it nice and horizontal so that when you make this cut, it's nice and flat. And most of my separations I just do with the Sawzall. Works very quick and very simply. So that's the Sawzall, that's the separation, okay? And then, the bottom half, you just throw it away. And then the top half, I'll typically bring them into the garage, and I want to position it, again, the trunk horizontally and my cut straight vertical. So I'll suspend the top of the tree from something on the ceiling there, the garage door track to get that to hang out over the edge of the table so that I can do some work down here on the bottom of the roots. Okay? This tree, it was a really large tree when I did it, did the bare rooting, so I was not able to get entirely bare rooted. So it's really obvious when you do the separations that old field soil that has the organic matter looks dark. And so this is a nice bonsai soil, nice brown and white, and you know exactly where the field soil is. So that tells me I need to pick that field soil out, but it's really extremely evident where it is. So very, very easy to see. Okay. And then after I picked out all the field soil, since there was a pretty good cone of field soil right in the center of it, I always try to make, some tunnels that come out between surface roots so that I can use those tunnels to get the new soil into, when I pot it up. And then after I've got all the field soil out, then I take cutters and remove some of those thick vertical roots that were feeding the bottom half. I shorten those so that someday I can get it into my proper height or depth bonsai pot. Okay? And then, so this is the tree sitting upright after I'd done the bottom work. And you can see there's one of the tunnels right there. I usually try to do 3 or 4 around the tree so that I have plenty of access to get that soil in there so I don't leave any air pockets if there's a dome inside that root mass. Okay? And this is the tree in its first bonsai pot. It's just a mica pot, but it's a bonsai pot. It's a OVA 19 and fit in very easily. And as you could see, from that previous picture, those roots were just fine, solid root mass there. They're just beautiful. And I know that it's all bonsai soil in there, so I never have to worry about that again. Okay? This another separation. So this tree, this is one of the burls. I really got a lot of questions answered on this tree this year, especially from this morning. But this tree had been blown over up in the field at Telperion, blown over, knocked over, driven over, something like that. But the roots had come up out of the ground and formed this mass. It's very similar to Jonas's tree, but much more massive of roots there that were exposed. So when I did the top-down repot 2 years ago, all I found underneath this solid wooden mass was another solid wooden mass. So it basically had a basketball-size burl that I learned now, burl underneath this thing. And so, man, you say, what the heck am I going to do with this? There's no way you're going to put that much wood into a bonsai pot. Number one, it would take up more height than you can handle, and there would be no room for soil. So, you just have no idea what to do. But it sounds like, yes, you can just saw these things off, and they will sprout new roots. So this tree, I had built a little dam of hardware cloth around it and filled it with bonsai soil also when I did the repotting to try to grow some higher roots. So that's what the hardware cloth is there for. Okay? And typically when I do a separation, I just take my saw and do the cut across there and not do any bare rooting on the bottom half, but I knew this tree had serious problems with the bottom half, so I did a kind of a bare root on the bottom half to see what was in there and to help me decide where I wanted to make my cut. But see how nice and tight that top half is already. I mean, it just holds together. It's full of mycorrhiza. Very, very happy tree. Okay? And so I tried with my Sawzall. You can see the cut right there, and going through that solid burl, it just gummed up, and then the tree started wiggling back and forth, and it wasn't going anywhere. And the saw blade was smoking, and you could see that wasn't working. So then I got out a big pruning saw that had thicker kerf, and I started sawing away on that. I did it for a couple minutes and got nowhere. So, okay, grab the chainsaw. And the chainsaw worked really, really well. It just buzzed through that in, 20 seconds. So sometimes when you're going through a big burrow like that, for me, that chainsaw worked really, really well. And the other thing is, in my soil, I don't use any lava cinders. So I think it's not too rough on the chainsaw because you're just cutting through pumice and akadama, and organic matter. So I don't think it's too hard on the chainsaw. If you use lava cinders and you chainsaw through that, you're going to need to resharpen your saw or get a new chain. So you can see the solid mass of burl there on that side, okay? Just another close-up of that, but that was a pretty good chunk of burl through that, okay? And then had a nice flat bottom. Went into that pot, OVA 19 mica pot again very easily, and I just secured it with the wires from the edge of the mica pot up to some dead wood on the tree. I'm sure everybody screws into mica pots, drills holes through them, but they really work nice as training pots because you can put screws in anything and hold downs and stuff like that. This tree that had fallen over and the roots were exposed, when I first saw the tree, you could see the individual roots, but in the 5 or 6 years since I've been working with this tree, those roots have all fused, and the delineation from the trunk to that mass of roots has really softened, so that I expect that's going to continue, and that this lower mass of root burl won't be that distinguishable from regular bark in the future, I hope. Okay. And just for the heck of it, I took the hose and sprayed off the bottom half. You can see the attempted cuts there that failed. And you can just see the solid mass of burl that's underneath that thing. Just amazing. Okay? Okay, so if this is interesting to you and you have a tree in a deep pot, a nursery container, root bound, and you think you might want to try this, go ahead, take the leap. This was just a week ago in my pond. 3 deer had walked over to the island, and 2 of the deer swam back, and I could see the third one was panicked, and I just knew she was going to jump, and so she leaped up out of there, and huge splash and everything, so it was very funny. But if you decide to try this, if you've got a tree to try it on, please do, and let me know your results. And if there's modifications of the technique that you come up with and could share with me, I'd really appreciate that. Other questions? Yes?
All those comments that make sawzall blades with carbide teeth now.
You need something with really thick kerf, something to get the sawdust out of there because it's so sappy, it just glues down, yeah. So it's not the hardness of the blade, but you got to get the sap and sawdust out of there. Yes?
The sawzall blade with the really deep teeth, like a quarter-inch.
I see they make sawzall blades that are for pruning, and I have not. Yeah, I have not tried those, and that has a very deep kerf, so I think those would probably work good. Maybe next time I'll try that one. Thank you. Yes, so my Sawzall is a super Sawzall plug-in, and it's got plenty of power. Yep. Yes. Okay, Jeffrey, what happened to the first one? Oh. Okay. Very good. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for your attention. Hope you enjoyed it. One other comment, I've got all these pictures printed in a book, so if anybody has specific questions, just look me up the rest of the seminar here, and we can look at those pictures together and answer questions. Yes?
You have the boards over there too with the snowbell and the...
Yes, we've got 3 different trees that we've done the top-down bare rooting. There's the snowbell and juniper on this side, and the Japanese black pine that's exhibited on the other side of the screen right there has 8 pictures done up by Scott. These pictures are just incredible. You know, Scott has accumulated these from everybody and just put them together in such a beautiful display. You know, a really big round of applause for what Scott has put together there.